Hello, this is the final set of notes for integer subtraction. Finally, yay! So let's go ahead and get through these last two examples. Our essential question is more or less the same as before. How do we demonstrate subtraction of integers? And let's begin with two examples. In example 3, I break it up into two parts. Example 3 says model the following expressions with a picture and a number line. Part E is an expression that says 8 minus negative 5. And part F is an expression that says 6 minus negative 9. Let's begin focusing on expression E. So we'll begin using integer chips, or the positive and minus circles, to model this first expression. I'll begin with 8 positive circles because my first number is positive 8. I go ahead and do that, and I get 8 circles all with plus signs in them. Now, the next part of my expression says to take away or subtract 5 negatives, but as we see, there are no negatives in here to be found. So I have to bring in some negatives, and the only way I can do that is if I call in 0 pairs. Because remember, 0 pairs travel with a positive and a negative together. So since I need 5 negatives, I'm going to bring in 5 0 pairs. Now remember, when you add 0 pairs, you're not changing the value of your number. I have 8 positives here, and I'm adding 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 over again, which still gives me an answer of 8. Now I have to organize my pictures here, so I'm going to make 2 rows, one with all my positives and one with my negatives. When I do that, I get the following picture. I get my 8 original positives plus the 5 that came with the 0 pair, and then the 5 negatives that also came with the 0 pair. So it's still equal to 8. Now I have to reflect back on my original expression, which is subtract 5 negatives. And now I finally do have 5 negatives that I can subtract. So I'm going to go ahead and just take them away, or mark them out in other words. And I go ahead and do that. When I subtract those 5 negatives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I bring down whatever remains. In this case, I have a total remaining of 13 positive circles, or positive 13 in other words. But as always, we want to verify our answer, so let's go ahead and check our answer now by using a number line. I'll go ahead and write my expression again and begin with a number line. In this example, my number line stretches from negative 2 to positive 14. Once again, I skipped every other digit in the labeling, but I did leave marks for all the odd digits in between. So I have a complete number line here. To make my first line segment, I always begin at 0, and then I go to whatever my first value is. In this case, it's a positive 8. So I'll make a line that starts at 0 and goes all the way to positive 8. When I do that, I get a line that looks just like this. Now I want to take away or subtract negative 5. Here's where we have something very interesting that happens. Generally, when we say subtract, that means to make things get smaller, which means to make things go to the left on a number line, because things get smaller as you go to the left. But if you have a negative sign, that kind of tells you to flip direction. So subtraction means go left, the negative means do the opposite, so I'm going to end up going to the right instead. This number of spaces, 5. So I'm going to go ahead and make a second line that shows that. I began where my first line ended, and I go 5 spaces to the right. So in this case, whenever I have minus and adding that same number of spaces, so my resulting answer is going to be a line that starts at 0 and goes all the way to positive 13, which matches my answer from above in the integer model up here. So I know 13 is the correct answer. Now let's look on to example F. Example F says we have 6 minus negative 9. So let's begin modeling this with integer circles and start with our first digit, a positive 6. So I'll begin by drawing 6 positive circles. So now I have 6 circles with 6 plus signs in them. That equals positive 6. My expression asks me to take away or subtract 9 negatives. But once again, we have absolutely no negatives here to take away from. So what I need to do is figure out a way to bring in negatives. And once again, it's going to be 0 pairs to the rescue. So how many 0 pairs do I bring in, you ask? The number that I need. In this case, since I need 9 negatives, I'm going to bring in 9 0 pairs. And remember, adding 0 pairs does not change your value. So I still have 6 plus 0 over and over and over again to give me a grand total of 6. Now I'm going to redraw this picture with all my positives on one line and all my negatives on the other. When I do that, I get a picture that looks like this. I have my original 6 positives plus the 9 more positives that came in with the 0 pairs and the 9 negatives that came with them as well. Now I can look back at my expression which says to subtract 9 negatives. Do I have 9 negatives to subtract? I sure do. They're all right here on this second line. So I can go ahead now and subtract my 9 negatives. I scratch them all out. Whatever remains comes on down. And in this case, I end up with positive 15 circles, which equals just the number 15 or positive 15. And finally, I'm going to check this answer with a number line. So I write my expression again, 6 minus negative 9, and then I'll begin making a number line that starts from about negative 1, goes to positive 16, and in this case I only labeled the even numbers, but I left space on the number line for all the odds in between as well. You can't skip any numbers when you're making a number line. So my first line segment will begin from 0 and go the distance of my first digit, which is 6. So I'll make a line that starts at 0 and goes all the way to the right to positive 6. When I do that, I get a line segment that looks like this. Now I'm going to subtract negative 9. But remember, subtract means to go to the left, but the negative sign means to switch directions, so I'm going to end up going to the right. Basically, I'm going to be adding. And I'm going to add how many? 9. So I'll make my second line that begins right where my first line left off and then goes 9 spaces to the right. Wherever I end up ends up being my answer. To better see what this looks like, I went ahead and just drew one line on the bottom that represents both movements together. I have the 0 plus the positive 6, and then I went minus negative 9, which makes me increase 9 more, and I end up at positive 15. So one of the big ideas we learn from this is that whenever we have subtraction of a negative number, all we're really doing is just adding. And this concludes our notes for subtraction of integers.